Yeah, we just turned the temperature up. People hope we're going to.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be open.
Okay, we'll reconvene this meeting. We went a little bit more than 10 minutes, but that's okay. Okay, pleasure of the board. Do we want to start on a list? Do we want to ignore the list? What do we want to do? Okay, I'll throw in my 2 cents. I want to start on the list. I've got some ideas of my own, and so, but let's start with this list. Do you want to start with the long list or the short list?
They should be the same. The long list has the Community Action Agency, which is HHS, on there as well, which is a pretty substantial amount of revenue there. It goes to a very small group of individuals.
Okay. Well, Mr. Dubai, I'll let you take the lead on these. You're the one that came up with these numbers.
Okay. So you want to go? I didn't come up with the numbers. I just came up with the suggestion.
Okay.
So the foundations for building I have first, which is my region membership, which is a $25,000 expenditure. My question would be is, how do we measure the success that is incorporated with the expenditure, and would that be better used for paving? I know it's only a quarter mile, but quarter miles add up, and certainly need to look at this, because if we don't, then I think the default of staff is just to continue funding these type of things, and then we bring up the issue next year, or potentially bring it up next year.
And along that same line, I would point out that if and when this county gets to the point where it's awash with cash again, like it was 8-10 years ago, these organizations, if they get cut now, they can come back and take a shot at the public trough again and see what the commissioners at that point in time say. But, okay, so we've got the foundation for building. I don't even know what this is, and we did have one person talk about it.
I've been to it before. I mean, I think I had one meeting. It's basically a number of different communities to discuss a lot of stuff they can do regionally. One of the items is it's a sharing of various different issues for the region, like homelessness. Various things like, we were discussing problems with waste, how to deal with that regionally, and how it could work together. It's good organization, good dialogue, and Mr. Stewart spoke about it. I think it's useful.
And clearly, I mean, it says they have regularly scheduled meetings with the county manager. So I assume Mr. Whitten has met. I'm not saying they're not fulfilling I'm sure you've met with these folks on a regular basis. Is that correct, Mr. Whitten?
Matt, I'm not sure how regular it is, but Mr. Stewart could actually speak to the return on investment for that organization. But I've met with him. I know him quite well and know the organization. Yes, sir.
So we have a new, county manager that will be coming in, and Mr. Whitten has some, priorities and goals, and that, by all regards, have probably
Is Mr. Stewart still here?
Yes, sir.
Successful, but.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, you're on the hot seat.
I'm delighted to be so.
Explain to us why we should not cut $25,000 for my region membership.
What John's asking for is the tangibles, and it is very hard. But the thing that's beginning to work in this region is the way that we are agreeing to work together. All 7 counties, 86 cities, really trying to do this. So I've been at it 9 years, okay, and it has just been a remarkable transformation. So what Jim talked about, we have a Congress of Regional Leaders. That's 7 county chairs, and Kurt, you'll be invited to do that. That's the 7 mayors, and in fact, Rita, it comes from Palm Bay, so Your mayor of Palm Bay is there. And by the way, the sweet thing about Palm Bay, it's the second largest city of the 86, and yet the other 85 mayors hardly know that. But we meet, and that's where Jim has talked about, we're going to that. So there's that piece. John mentioned the delegation. We've been benefited because Steve Crisafulli was the chair, not only the Speaker of the House, but the chairman of the delegation, and that was a super blessing for us. And so we're reconstructing that. It's 10 senators, 26 House members, trying to hold them together on regional priorities. And Kurt, when you mentioned transportation, we are in the process, the second year of a transportation task force working with all 7 counties and what we would call the great transportation thinkers, and that's 2 CEOs from over here, and that includes the CEO of the port and the spaceport and the seaport. So Frank's on there and John's on there, and we meet regularly with those, what are the 9 CEOs, all talking about regional partnerships.
Okay, so tell me what happens if the $25,000 goes away?
The other 6 counties will pick up the slack. All 7 counties are investing simultaneously, and so that's where we are. And then we raise a 2-to-1 match against the county's $25,000. So 175 comes in to the foundation, and the name of it, John, it's the Foundation for Building Community, and the product that we drive to market is called My Region. And then I go to the private sector and do a 2-to-1 match into that foundation to operate this work. So that's the deal.
Okay,
all right?
Thank you.
86 cities. We only have 1 city that invests, and that's the city of Orlando invests essentially on behalf of all 86 cities. So I think it's a prototype for regional cooperation across the United States. In fact, Tampa Bay partnership is actually getting ready to kind of is borrowing some of our ideas with great enthusiasm. Because Kurt, when you put this together, Tampa Bay and Central Florida, that's the 10th largest economy in the United States, ahead of Miami and ahead of Atlanta. And so when you talk about 55 miles of road, I'm trying to play up to get our airports, not just one, but our airports to cooperate in greater ways. The Expressway Authority right now with Brevard coming on to the east, to the Central Florida Expressway, that's huge. That's a direct result of our work and our advocacy for Brevard being part of that. So I hope the legislature votes in the affirmative of that. And then when we get Brevard in, then we're going to be coming right at Volusia. So that's part of the network we're doing. I met with Laura Kelly yesterday, the CEO of the Expressway Authority, on this exact topic, how important Brevard is to be part of the Expressway Authority.
Thank you.
A lot of little things like that. Okay? Thank you.
you.
And John, thank you for your questions. All right.
I'm speechless. You know, we cut from people that need food when it comes to Meals on Wheels. By funding this, we're saying that what you just heard was more important than not only roads, but delivering food to
Any other
people that are
thoughts?
homebound.
I know we would have joined the Central Florida Expressway Authority. I mean, that was something that they sort of sought us out for, and I don't know what the rest of that was, but I just know that, you know, I've never heard of them, and I sat 2 terms on a large city in the county, and I definitely,
Okay.
I could think of other ways to spend this $25,000.
Okay, let's just set the parameters here. Do we want to keep it, cut it, or cut part of it?
I'll make a motion to cut it.
I'll second.
Any other conversation?
Yeah, if you cut it, does it go away completely? Is 25,000 the amount that you have to come in at, or can it have a partial cut?
It's the prerogative of the commission, ma'am.
Okay, and then my other question is what's going to be the impact if we do cut it?
Well, I'm delighted by the interest. And by the way, John, the reason I haven't briefed you as a matter of protocol, in all 7 counties, I work through the county manager. I'm not comfortable lobbying individual commissioners. Back to your question, we're going to continue full steam ahead.
Yeah, I already asked him that question.
So I'd hope nobody would even notice it. And if you replay what I've said, I've never said this is more important than feeding.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply
Yeah,
that, but that's
yeah.
a decision we have to make.
Yeah, it's a
That is
decision you would make.
It's a
and,
policy decision
right,
we are tasked with making.
Okay.
The question is, what is the service impact?
That's my question.
Zero, Jim, zero.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Tobias, second by Commissioner Isnardi.
The other way.
Sorry.
That's okay, I made the motion.
Okay, so
That's all right.
Commissioner Isnardi made the motion. Everybody else knows what you guys did. I'm just a little slow to the dance. And second by Commissioner Tobias. All those in favor to cut? Say
Aye.
aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, it passes 3-2. Commissioner Barfield and Pritchett are the nay votes. National Association of Counties membership, 10,868. Do we have anybody that can?
Mr. Chair, they gave us, Frank, correspondent with them, and they've given you a membership benefits report.
Right, I got it.
And so you have the listing of items that they believe are value added for the $11,000 membership. Every county in the state is a member of the National Association. You see their federal funding, advocacy, money-saving programs. I think most significantly, as you all talked about, residents that can't take care of themselves or need some assistance. You'll note that if you're a member of NACO, your residents are able to participate in the prescription discount card program. And so since we've been a member or been participating in that, that's a savings of $9 million. So that's the report from NACO for you.
$9 million in just Brevard County?
Yes, sir.
And over what kind of length of time? Since we
I don't
joined?
Since the
remember.
inception of the program, it's over 10 years.
Yeah, I think it's over 10 years.
That would still be $900,000 a year.
Are there any other pharmacy prescription discount programs that don't require a membership in NACO? Are there
I'm
opportunities?
sure there's a variety of different programs.
And that was going to be my question, having, myself being in the medical field, I know that there are a plethora of prescription drug programs only, and I'm not saying that I disagree necessarily with our participation in this, but I don't think that this is a fair assessment or argument, only because I work with social workers all the time in the hospital and even in hospice, and there's always, they have drawers full of free, the city even has one, the League of Cities, I know that and it's free, there's no obligation by the organization, by the municipality to push, promote, or otherwise, so I would rather see, I was hoping that this document, and maybe our manager can, talk about, I know like with the League of Cities, I probably disagree with probably 75% of their platform, but a few of the good things that they did do, which is still, I could still argue that I don't know that participation in a membership is necessarily the way I would go personally if it was up to me, but I know that some of the workshops that they used to have on teaching pension, the new elected leader kind of stuff, some of the programs that they have was beneficial to the board. But, do you have anything else that they do besides this? Because I don't...
Well, yeah. Remember I said they've given it to you in categories. And so the federal funding, the advocacy there, they've talked about the advocacy for the payment in lieu of taxes, the community development block grant, the home. On the second page, in terms of education, training, and professional development, you see the two items under there, the webinars there. And so this is what they presented to us in response to give us a return on investment or give us a value of your membership there. So this is what we've received from them.
We have Congressman Posey that is up there advocating on our behalf, extremely well. And, I highly doubt if the National Association of Counties doesn't get our $10,868, they're going to stop advocating on behalf of any of these organizations. I would be willing to hold on this until I found another program to make up for the one. I'm sure there's many out there to make up for the prescription discount card, because I wouldn't want to leave anyone in the lurch. And I don't have a direct answer that there. I'm sure, sure there's many out there, but I can't name one. And short of me naming one, I was just presented with this. And that's why these workshops are great. But the discretion of the chair.
Can I charge you with trying to find?
Absolutely. I've already made a note. Yep.
Okay, so let's pass on that one.
Can I ask one more quick question before we move on?
Sure.
Mr. Whitten, you said that every other county participates in this?
Yeah, Florida is one of the few states where all of the counties participate. So all 67 counties in Florida are a member of a National Association of Counties.
So my other request would be is Commissioner Tobias coming back with that. If, Frank, you could come back with information that if we dropped out of this, what's the potential amount of revenues we'll be missing out on? If there is any.
Okay.
Okay, next, International City County Management Association.
I think the county manager mentioned that was in his contract.
Yeah, I'm sure the new county manager will have a different contract. That person may or may not want to be a member of that, or is a member of that, or want to include that in the contract. So that's not an issue for me.
What do you mean, it's in your contract?
It was in the contract
Oh,
that
okay,
Howard
gotcha.
had, that the board would pay
Gotcha.
for membership in the
Gotcha.
ICMA.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was involved in negotiating one of those contracts years ago, and so depending on who the board selects, sometimes you could expect that a candidate may be very involved in the ICMA and may put that in there. As a matter of fact, I think there was one where we had a past county manager who had in the contract that they would be attending the ICMA national conferences, et cetera, and all that. And that was just something that was negotiated into the contract and that the board had accepted in the past.
So we could get rid of this 3,500 and wind up with 5,000 for something else.
Well, travel
By
to
the
the
new
conference
manager.
is also in the contract also. So you got the membership and you got the travel in the current
Right, right.
contract.
So what would be your thoughts on this $3,500? Just,
My thoughts are.
You don't care?
It may be attractive to somebody who is fully invested in ICMA, and you may have a candidate that's not, so.
We could always, if the new person came in and this was a great candidate and this was a sticking point, we always could join, correct? Yeah.
The membership is an individual membership, so.
Because it wasn't, I don't know if when you guys sat with our recruiter, the ICMA was brought up, and I know our city, the city of Palm Bay was, I think the retirements through the ICMA even for the upper management. So I know that they're pretty big. So, I see somebody coming in, if they have any experience at all, probably asking for that membership.
okay, pleasure of the board. What do we want to do?
I think we can cut it and renegotiate it with the new county manager if they come in.
I will second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Pritchett to cut the International City County Management Association, second by Commissioner Tobias. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0. Federal lobbyists, 48,000.
Mr. Chairman, you have Mr. Pauly's report. I think he gave you 4 pages of his activities throughout the years.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr.
Can I don't, it's Mr. Pauly?
Yes.
Okay.
Eddie Pauly.
Eddie Pauly. I don't know Mr.
Well, in my 2.5 years here, I can tell you from my personal perspective, he's worth his weight in gold, and then some.
And would you hear that from Representative Posey? Because when there's a federal issue that is of importance,
Mr. Pauly is the go-to guy for Mr. Posey.
I'm sorry, you don't go to Representative Posey, you go to lobbyists?
Absolutely, no, but Mr. Posey, Mr. Posey will coordinate with Mr. Pauly. Mr. Pauly knocks on a lot of doors in Washington, as well as Mr. Posey does.
Okay. So we need a lobbyist to go to our current representative?
My opinion is yes.
Well, it's
Okay.
more than that also. He sets up, I mean, I've been involved also. A lot of meetings we've had, especially when it comes down to beach restoration, to the Corps of Engineers, through various different committee members, various other ones in D.C., both in the Senate and the House side. He puts all that together, and it's been very beneficial. Obviously, we've gotten funding every year, and it continues to get funding. So my experiences with him, it's well worth it, because I've been in D.C. on a lot of other aspects prior to being a county commissioner, and you've got to have someone like that. I think it's well worth it.
When I've been to D.C., he's opened doors at Army Corps of Engineers for me to speak to them about our lagoon projects and dredging projects. I couldn't go in there by myself. I couldn't knock on their door and say, hey, can I make an appointment to come see you guys? But he can get you in the door.
That's just Representative Posey's been absolutely wonderful whenever I've spoken
And
with
you know, in Washington, like a lot of places, it's who you know. And so knowing Mr. Posey, knowing Senator Nelson and Mr. Rubio and Eddie Pauly, you can get a lot of doors opened. Any other thoughts? Any other comments?
Yeah, he came by my office. I met him one time, and he spent about an hour with me, and he seemed very impressive. From reading his track history, he seems to have done very well. I can't tell you that I've known him long enough to be able to know the way you guys do with some information, but I think as far as where I am as a new commissioner, I'd like to write it out and see what he brings to the table. He brought us an opportunity to study out for a grant program that we're working hard on, so.
Yeah, and this time next year, you know, that would give you another year to look at what he does and how he does it. And
Do you know, and I don't have this information, I apologize, is it an annual
Yes.
contract? So would his annual contract be up where we would do an RFP?
Yeah, I don't know what the term is, but purchasing could look for that. And probably get the answer before we leave there. I think it's a term contract. I don't think
Okay.
it's an annual.
Yeah, I mean, it may be, I don't know, it may be a 2-year term and we can't get rid of it, so it was just something I
Yeah,
thought was open for discussion.
I think it's yearly, but I'm
Yeah, no, I think it's a term, but if purchasing is listening, or someone from the budget office will go run that now.
Great, so we can, put that one to the
yeah, so
side.
we'll just move past that.
Sounds good.
Lee Brevard.
We heard from, what I heard from Lee Brevard, it could be wrong, but they said they serve an important function, but helping the folks that can't, for like Meals on Wheels, aging, I thought they said was more important. They'd rather see their funds go in that direction. Is that what you heard from the first speaker?
That's what I heard.
Which I thought was momentous.
I would like, just talking to a few people out in the community, at least if we could get with them and perhaps see if they're interested in teaming up with our Eli team to see if they can play a part in that. Because I'm sure they have some valuable tools that they can offer. I know they used to run that program in the past, but, assuming we...
I've worked with Kristen on ELI. They've been involved with them.
And
in the
assuming
past.
we still fund Eli, of course, depending on the will of the board, but...
So do we want to do anything with Lee Brevard, or we want to come back and visit it later?
I'll make a motion that we cut the funding for Lee Brevard and ask and direct management to see if Lee would be interested in working with staff.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Can we ask Lee Brevard if there's going to be any economic pain to the county if we do this real quick? Would you mind?
Sure, no.
Yes, ma'am.
If your funding's cut, is there going to be any economic, I can't think of the word I want to use.
Impacts.
Thank you, one of those two, to the county from doing this?
Well, there will be two. There will be two. One of the services that we've provided to Brevard County under the current contract is the Community Stakeholder Summit, which is a platform for the county manager annually in the fall, and that event has been complimentary to your constituents, and that is an event that we would then we would have to institute a fee to attend as a fee for service to replace that, a small percentage of that income. Another piece of the contract currently is there is a county employee who, at the manager's discretion, is a participant in the Leadership Brevard program, and that, of course, would not be available other than, a fee for services, because the contract funds wouldn't be there to support it. The Leadership Brevard program will continue under its tuition, as it has. And as I said, our mission is to continue to educate and to inspire leaders, and we'll continue to do that.
And if your funding was cut, do you feel like your board could possibly be interested in working with county, like on their Eli program?
Thank you. Yes, in fact,
So I didn't talk to you, I was talking to somebody else, and I don't want to speak for your board by any
Well,
means,
and
but-
no, but I'm empowered to speak for our board very, very broadly, because that has been a discussion, obviously, when we looked at a complete reduction in funding to make the bold step in leadership that we did propose to you today. Obviously, there's conversations around that in terms of how do we replace that revenue. Our core niche in expertise is in leadership, and we would be delighted. I've had a conversation with Mr. Abate and Mr. Witten to that effect, and we would certainly be interested in exploring that with you.
Great.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to cut the funding to lead Brevard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Passes 4-1. Commissioner Pritchett, the nay.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Pauly's contract had a term of, it was a 2-year term. It is July 2016 to June of 2018.
Thank you. Next up, Historical Commission.
Mr. Chair, we've already agreed that those expenses could be moved to the library district.
Right. Okay. We don't need a motion to do that?
No, just direction.
Okay. Then we'll direct the county to do that. Okay, Employee Innovations Program. I'm at a loss here. I don't know even what that is.
Go ahead.
Is that?
Frank will tell you what that is.
Yeah, this is a board policy and an administrative order that provides an opportunity for employees to submit ideas on how to be more efficient and cut costs, and it provides a mechanism internally where it would come back to the board if the idea is accepted and implemented. If there is a cost savings, they could get a certain amount of money as a percentage of the savings. I think it's up to 25%, up to a certain cap, and they would get only half of it at the beginning and half of it a year later once that savings was proven that it in fact did do that. That $7,500 that is there is what's put in there in the budget, I guess, to pay for it on the front end if it comes. If the board chose to eliminate that funding, what I would request is that perhaps you consider not eliminating the program. Let us come to you with that potential savings, and then if the board agreed to it, then we would be able to see that savings in that particular program and work it from there if that meets with the board's approval.
Well, let me ask you a question. If the $7,500 if no one comes forward with any ideas this year, then the $7,500
It
just
stays,
gets
right,
rolled over.
no, it goes back into, right, it
Right,
would
so
go
it's
into
really
the...
not costing us anything other
Right.
than, and I remember when we first came on board, we awarded one of the county employees with one of these because he's the one that came up with the idea of the rooms automatically darken after a period of time if nobody's moving. And then when you open the door, the lights all come on. And I think the number that he was supposed to be saving the county a year was
Yeah, and
stupid. It
we've
was-
had several of them over the years where people have, I don't want to say invented, but come up with significant ideas on how to modify equipment to save expenses and not have it done on the outside. And so, over time, there have been a number of people that have brought some valued ideas that the board has recognized, and then they've received awards for that. The program's been in effect for a number of years.
And from personal experience, I can tell you your employees can be your biggest assets because they're working day in, day out, and they can see things that you as a manager don't see, and they can say, hey, we could save money if we did it this way. And if they have an incentive to do that, and we have an incentive to listen, we can save a whole lot of money. And so my thought is, if it doesn't cost us anything, if nobody comes forward and costs us a small fraction, if they do come forward, I would think we'd be foolish to cut that program. But what are your guys' thoughts?
Do we have incentive of, I don't know, potential raises? I mean, or a promotion? I'm just wondering, now we're incentivizing you to do your job well. I mean, I would hope that the folks that work for me and the folks that work for the county want to work as hard as we are to make Brevard County better. And if they have a good idea, it's not, oh, I'm going to, I'm doing this solely so I can get a $3,000 check. I mean, a good manager is going to recognize a person that is very innovative and reward that person, next time there's a management opening or something like that. I would hope that, no one is hinging on sharing good ideas for a I don't know how much these rewards are, but I think that's part of doing your job, is you do it as well as you humanly possibly can, and we as a county are going to do our best to make sure that we pay you fairly and effectively.
I think the key word there you used was if the manager wants to stimulate his employees, he'll recognize that. Well, some managers do and some managers don't, but if an employee has the opportunity to toot his own horn and say, hey, listen, I've got an idea here, then he doesn't have to wait for a manager that otherwise isn't going to recognize him. So that's my thought.
I don't know, in my business, we have similar awards. And boy, I tell you, when you dangle something out there to look at how a better way of doing something or think outside the box, new technology or whatever, it's surprising what people come up with that, they're doing their job and they're doing a really good job. But when something like this comes up, they go, wow, what if we did this or what if we do that? And they know that it's not going to get lost in the paperwork or get lost somewhere when they make the suggestion. It's a formal way of reviewing it and gets attention at the executive level, and awards are made. I strongly support this. It's another means to give the employees additional incentives to look at other ways, and I think it's a good program.
In this particular program, there would be no awards that did not come to the board for its review and approval before, we did any kind of award under this.
Yeah, going back to the lights, it was a stupid number this guy supposedly saved us per year. I don't remember what it was, but it was early on when we first took office, and it was just by those lights going off, and lights aren't left on all night either, because they have to leave.
We have them in our office, and sometimes when you're on the phone or you're talking, if you're not moving, you have to do this to turn them back on, otherwise they shut off. But yeah, it's a good idea.
It's really bad when you're in the bathroom.
What's that?
It's bad when you're in the bathroom, too.
Okay, so what's the pleasure of the board with this one?
You want to make a motion to keep it instead of cut?
No, we
Okay,
don't have to make a motion to keep it. If nobody's
Yeah.
out to axe it, then we'll keep it.
I definitely, I highlighted as, I think,
Okay.
we reward people. So I don't think there's the support here. That's why I was going to say, let's
Okay.
keep a motion to.
Next, Lean Six Sigma workshops. Thoughts?
I love this program.
Mr. Witten, was this your impetus to pick this type of leadership or problem-solving scenario?
Yes, sir, and Mr. Abati has run with it, so,
Super.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you were making this decision, and it sounds like it's worked wonderfully for the county based on the evidence that you've shown us, were there other similar type of programs that, sought efficiencies just in different ways is where I'm going with this?
yeah, I don't know that I looked at others, but, Lean Six Sigma is a private sector initiative that's obviously applicable to public sector, and so Lean Six was the quickest way for us to train our employees, to change their mindset, and at the same time to also do projects. And so for us, it was, obviously you need some outside assistance, but basically we now have the two ladies that you saw today are green belts and are able to go around from department to department and share their expertise, looking for waste and promoting efficiency, and that's what Lean Six Sigma is. It's just continuous improvement.
So when we have a new county manager, that person may have a different type of leadership style and a different way that they have sought efficiencies through a different mechanism. Do you think it would, be better to, this is another program, is it not, that, if the next person comes in and says Lean Six Sigma is the best thing, is it something that if we left for a while that we could join?
Can I say something? I mean, this is a program that is industry, it is the state-of-the-art industry program that's used for businesses. My business uses it. We created our business around this. But you look in the industry, and it is accepted across the board as one of the top quality enhancements and efficiency enhancement programs there is. It has been proven all over the world how successful it is. And basically what it does is it does save money, increases efficiency, increases quality, and it's been very successful. I'm a very strong proponent of it. I don't really believe it comes as a county manager issue. I think it comes as a total corporate organization issue. That's something we drive.
Well, Mr. Witten was the one that said that he was the one that brought it to the county.
That's right.
But
It's been
let me,
successful.
if I may add, he may have, go ahead.
And I think Commissioner Barfield is right. It's a cultural dynamic, and so if you have, and I know my opinion doesn't matter much, but if your next county manager comes in and you have developers saying that during the development application review process, we've gone from a 117-day review to 59, and that person doesn't want to maintain this as a cultural organizational initiative, then that's probably not the right person. And so this probably is something that, as the commissioner said, should stay. It's a policy level decision in my mind. It's a cultural organizational initiative. And so again, the whole listing of projects that we went over today are designed to promote efficiency and get rid of waste.
Keep it, axe it, what do we want to do?
Keep it.
Keep it. Keep it.
Yeah, I've seen it work. I mean, it's, we probably should have done this a long time ago, and I don't blame Mr. Witten because he wasn't here 20 years ago, but,
I was here 20 years ago.
I mean, you weren't in charge 20 years ago. You were not in charge 20 years ago, so, but I mean, it's probably things we should have been doing. If we had that much of a lag of days to get anything through our growth management, then that was a bigger issue in itself. That it's sad that we need them, but it's obvious that we do. At least right now, I'm okay with keeping it.
Okay, moving right along, training. ELI 7 Habits and LeaderCast.
I like this too. I think it teaches people how to be better employees and to do better with communication skills. I know the 7 Habits does definitely teaches them, it just teaches how to be good
I heard
leadership.
good things about this before I even got elected. I met one of Mr. Abate's staff probably 3 years ago, and she was telling me some of the programs that the county does, and this is one of them, and she was just raving about how successful it was. And I haven't seen anything or heard anything since I've been elected that would change what she told me.
Also, a leader cast that you have access to, that's an amazing thing to see. Program, gone to it for many years.
Why do we have, I didn't see the breakdown. What's the breakdown between the three? Do we know of funding? I just have 15,000 for, is one more expensive? I mean, you can buy a lot of books of 7 Habits for a Highly Effective Leader for $15,000.
And let me speak to that. We have, in the 7 Habits program, which is very well received by those who participate, that actually happens to be part of what we do and we have that as a prerequisite for people who participate in the ELI program. We have trained facilitators who were trained through the Covey program on staff, and the only cost that we have as part of the 7 Habits now is the cost that we have to pay, of course, for the materials from Covey when we train the course, when we provide the course. We do not surcharge them and so the costs that are involved for us are very, very substantially lower than anyone could go and get the course anywhere else, because it's just a pass-through cost. And we have our own facilitators, so there's no outside trainers. Our own employees do that facilitation of that particular course. And we use that in conjunction with the ELI program. We have a variety of training programs, employee development programs, that we offer internally so that we can do exactly what this board has said in the past is important, is develop our employees to be able to step into the shoes. I can tell you, I can look each one of you in the eye and say that had I not gone through what we've done here, that I wouldn't be in the position, I wouldn't feel be in position even to step up on an interim basis, which I think ELI helped me and gives me the confidence in a variety of the other directors, all who have been through that. Not only do we do it internally for our own people, but we have been very successful in getting a variety of other organizations. As a matter of fact, over half the costs, and the reason that it is not that expensive a cost in the current program is because we charge outside agencies, employees from outside agencies to participate. They pay $1,600 a person to participate in that program, and it offsets the costs for us internally. And we have a lot of organizations participating. As a matter of fact, in the current program, of the 29 people, 17 come from outside agencies. We have put 12 people through the Sheriff's Department, 4 through the Property Appraiser's Office, 6 through Cape Canaveral, 11 through Melbourne, 19 through Palm Bay, 11 through Titusville, 11 through the Clerk of Courts, and there's others as well that have participated. It creates great networking and between the people who really develop strong relationships when they go through this 18-month program, and we've seen a lot of success in it. So we're hopeful the board sees the value in that and continuing as we try to further develop our own people internally in a cost-effective way. And we've done this for about 11 years now. I was basically the person who initiated it when we started with the help of a couple of other people who are no longer with us. And we get a lot of good feedback from it. So we appreciate the board's consideration of that.
And also, too, I mean, I'm not sure the length of time now, but could you, educate the board on how long it takes to go through ELI training? Because I think, a lot of people think it's like 5 classes and then you're done.
No, it starts with a 3-day retreat workshop that people participate in. They then have monthly, for an 18-month period, monthly workshops that they go through. They start with the lessons learned in the morning. They do a personal leadership that they actually each pick a topic, and during the course of the 18 months, everyone who's involved makes a presentation to the group as well. We bring in outside facilitators. Some are from within our organization. Some are from the school board. We actually had some from the city of Palm Bay participating, and that cuts the cost of the program as well, because we use those individuals to do that. We then have a section that's over a 5-month period called Great Teams, Great Leaders, Great Results, which is a part of the program. That's a Covey program as well that is incorporated into that program. So it's about an 18-month-long program that they go through, starting with that 3-day retreat. There are a lot of self-assessments that are done, and also assessments where people will ask, you will have a 360-degree assessment, which is people that are your subordinates, your peers, and then your supervisors as well that will do. And that's all part of the program, and we try to do that so people can get some insights from others as well as their own personal insights from themselves as to where they are. There's behavioral initiatives where we happen to use disc profiling, which shows people what their own style is as well as the style of others, and then how you look at those different styles when you know who they are. How to best interact with people of those various behavioral styles. As a matter of fact, I could tell you that you can ask any of our directors what is the behavioral styles under DISC of the other directors, and I would venture to say that virtually all of them could tell you what the DISC profiles of the others are. And that's all stuff that comes along as part of the program.
Okay, so, training stays, goes?
Stays.
Yes. I don't have the support on that one.
Okay, stays. Economic Development Commission. Your recommendation is defund it by 20% now, not 1/3?
I thought the precedent was set with the CBOs, so yes, I thought that that would be correct, as well as when we get to the grant writing, there needs to be quite a bit more transparency. I would like to, look into how this $1.4 million is spent, but by the grant that is exercised, we just don't have that ability. And I'm not talking about, how or who they're recruiting. I'm just talking about the mechanisms as far as salaries, the non-confidential stuff, travel, and all that good nonsense. We're not privy to that, and I don't think that's fair to the taxpayers. So my recommendations are twofold: A, more transparency when we write the grant, and B, yes, to start with a 20% discount on the $1.4 million that we provide to the EDC.
Comments? Board?
I'll start. You were first.
Go ahead.
I mean, seriously, with economic development, if we start cutting economic development at this point, we're still driving forward to get back to where we need to be post-shuttle. We've been very successful, but we have a long ways to go, I believe. I can sit and rattle off all the companies we brought in. I can talk about all the economic improvements it's brought to our community based on the salaries, based on, all of the other things that go along with that. I think we're really not being too forward-thinking if we go ahead and cut EDC now, especially with what we have going in Tallahassee, where there actually may be no incentives coming out of Tallahassee. I'm all against cutting this.
Ms. Pritchett?
The first part you said, if you would write that down, I would like time to think about it.
I'm sorry, what?
About the grant writing and stuff, if we could do that. The second part, I'm not ready to cut them either. Roads are important, and I think stopping the inventory is a big deal, but I still think number one priority of this county's jobs, and we're still fighting hard for them up in District 1. And so to me, that's number one priority of this budget, is still trying to get jobs in, because that's going to increase revenues and housing, businesses, and it's going to help promote better growth here in the county. So I'm definitely not in favor of anything this year. It's going to cut any kind of economic development or any kind of job creation.
Commissioner Zardi?
I guess I would say, I realize the importance of economic development, but perhaps I have a different perspective on what we should be doing to promote economic development. And I'm not going to, go backwards and talk about decisions of this board and boards of past on where we've decided to dump money into economic development, where we've gifted, billion-dollar corporations hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars. That, to me, is wasted money on economic development for companies that were already committed to investing into our community. And that's not just this board, that's boards of past as well. The only issue I have, and again, I'll acknowledge, the EDC is a lot like a lobbyist. I mean, they're a necessary evil. You want to get something done, you need an EDC. Where I take issue is, number one, whether or not we should be doing that ourselves in-house. And I've heard the arguments both sides, but I've seen both sides of it. I know there's been trouble with this commission, maybe not these actual members, and with transparency in the past, and I've had those discussions with Linda Weatherman of the EDC, and I take issue with that. So, I mean, as much as I would love to just axe them completely, I realize, again, that they're necessary. I mean, to say that would be hurting the county, cutting economic development. But perhaps in the future, maybe we look at how we do it better. I'm going to get a different perspective now, being a member of this commission. Maybe the answer is a cut, and maybe we talk about that. But again, I mean, as much as I would love to just say that we don't need them, that I would be lying. I mean, I've served before. I'm not as it's been told, we have 3 rookies on this board. None of us sitting here, none of these new commissioners are rookies. We've all been here before. We've all had our dealings with economic development in our own situations, even though if they may have been different. So I know, again, they're like lobbyists. We need them. They do build those relationships. We may not agree with their tactics. I may not agree with the fact that, I take great pain with us gifting large sums of money to corporations that, to them, is pennies on their bottom line, but to us as a county is more devastating to ours, and not just our infrastructure, but our budget, So I'd be open to talking about something different than this number right here. But I understand, that we do need to fund them.
Okay, well, let me just throw
So I
in
guess
some
it's up to
thoughts.
you.
Yeah.
A higher or lower number of cut from that 20%?
Obviously not an increase.
Okay. No.
Do you not know me yet, Commissioner
I'm
Tobias?
just- Yeah.
I'm saying, I'm just...
Okay, let me weigh in on this. When I was campaigning, I was often asked about the Economic Development Commission, the EDC. And having been a businessman, I understand the importance of promotion. Sometimes it's called advertising, promotion. You can build the biggest and the best widget in the world, but if you just open your doors for business and you're not out there promoting, nobody's going to beat a path to your doorstep. So I don't care, and my words then specifically, verbatim, were, I don't care if you call it the ABC, the XYZ, or the EDC, you've got to promote. You've got to get out there and promote. And so we have the EDC as our promotion arm. The county has voted twice now, I guess, maybe 3 times, 70% or better, that they want economic development incentives to bring in businesses. Commissioner Zanardi, you just mentioned that you have some heartburn giving away millions of dollars to these companies that are going to come here anyway. Well, I've heard that before, and people have said that to me before. I simply say, well, if they're going to come here anyway, that's like saying your spouse would have married you anyway if you just stayed home and watched TV. They're not just coming here anyway. And a perfect example, and I hate to say this happened, but it did happen, and it's only now, I've known about it since probably December, but it's official now. This will hopefully put that kind of thought pattern to rest forever. Blue Origin came here. We gave them $8 million for site preparation to come here. I got a lot of pushback on that deal because I was told, well, this guy's the 3rd richest man in the world. Why would we give him $8 million? Well, because he's giving us the opportunity to have a company that builds rockets right here in this county. And so if the $8 million was the incentive that we needed, then we felt it was important to do that. And in return, he was building a $220 million building, and if he didn't get a CO, he didn't get the $8 million. So we had plenty of protection there. And when he does build the building, he's bringing $32 million a year in salaries. To me, as a businessman, as an investor, I'll take that $32 million every day of the year. If I had $8 million to pony up, and somebody's going to give me $32 million a year for years and years in the future, I'll grab that and take it. Okay, so how does that fit in with he would have come here anyway? Because I keep hearing that they would have come here anyway. Well, out of all the thousands of rockets that have been launched from KSC in the last 50 years, not one of them has ever been built here. So that, I think, would lay to rest the idea that they're going to come here anyway. Number two, they also were looking for a place to build their rocket motors. And what more natural fit would be to build those motors right here as well. They're building the rockets here. There's a big parcel of ground right next to where they're building the plant that would be perfect to build their rockets. So it's a natural fit, right? They're going to come here anyway. Well, guess what? They went to Greenville, South Carolina. We didn't have enough incentives. We didn't offer them enough incentives. So they took the business that should have come here, would have come here anyway. They didn't come here anyway. They went to Greenville, South Carolina. Took all that money, all those jobs. We're not getting it. The other thing is that he started out with, what was it, a 200,000 square foot building? 250,000 square foot building. Well, he's upped it, and he's almost up to 700,000 square foot building. 750,000 square foot building. So he continues to dump money into this county. So we lost with that rocket motors. It's a shame, but it's gone. And I hate to see it gone. But Blue Origin came here because of the EDC and because of going to things like the Space Symposium. That originated the year before you and I took office. But they made the contact there because at that time, Blue Origin was leaning towards the Mid-Atlantic Space Agency, which is Wallops Island and Virginia Beach. And we met the guy that is the director for that last year or the year before at the Space Symposium in Colorado Springs, and he swears that they had Blue Origin locked up. They weren't coming here. He swears they were going there until they blew a rocket up 20 feet off the pad, blew up their pad, and set them back probably 8 to 10 years. So Blue Origin, we became the next option. But we also were still competing against Georgia and South Carolina. And I spent a lot of time on the phone before I agreed to vote for that $8 million. And I spent a lot of time on the phone with their CEO and their CFO. And they both told me in separate conversations that they did want to come here, but South Carolina and Georgia were actually offering more incentives, but they weren't enough to offset what we were offering if we could come up with the $8 million. So I voted for the $8 million. Mr. Barfield voted for it, and they came here, and so hopefully pretty soon we can say the rest is history. But we didn't even get out of the batter's box or into the batter's box for the rocket engines. And that was when I first heard about it and they first started approaching them about that, I thought, man, we're going to be just kicking butt.
But what would your solution been at that point? Just keep offering tens of millions of dollars until they agreed to stay?
Well, no, the problem there was that the governor had lost his, what was it, Enterprise Florida? What was his funding source?
The closing fund.
Yeah, the closing fund. He didn't have any money left in the closing fund, and he couldn't come to our aid, and we couldn't offer anymore. We gave him our best shot, and it wasn't enough. So.
But I mean, I don't think you probably want to get in the weeds, but I could I could even pull it up on my computer, cite many more examples where they weren't as pretty as the picture you just painted for Blue Origin about decisions that were made to give Walmart money, to give many other organizations money, but I don't think like I said, I don't think we want to go down that path at this point.
Well, you can obviously there's gradations of good, bad, and better,
right.
Obviously, but that is the poster child of the Economic Development Commission. So I don't have any problem you looking into it further. I think it's worthwhile.
Like I said, this isn't my first rodeo as far as this commission's job goes and with my dealings with the EDC. And I don't even have an issue with tax abatements and that sort of thing. I just take issue with us paying because it hurts our budget a lot more than it helps.
Well, that
theirs.
$8 million didn't come out of our budget.
Right, I'm talking about some of the other deals that were made with other, but again, I mean, I'm not here to take pot shots. Those are decisions that were made by this board in fair
Well,
manner,
in the
but-
interest of
Did they discuss other things? I highly doubt a man that's worth billions and billions and billions of dollars makes a decision on a couple $1 million. Do you think he probably looked at workforce?
well, that was one, that was
Or
also...
infrastructure,
that was-
or the business tax rate, or regulations? I think it's circular logic to say he didn't come to Brevard County because we didn't offer him $1 million. I guarantee you that, that they were making a decision based on 55 different factors. I
Well,
imagine any
probably, but I'm
businessman-
telling you what they told me. I wanted to know why we
Well,
didn't.
you're the guy that's handing out the money. What do you think they're going to tell you?
After the deal's done, I would think that they'd be pretty
You
honest.
don't think that they plan to expand or maybe build another part of the rocket here, I mean, as a negotiating tactic, I think they might have played us like a fiddle.
Yeah,
Used
well,
us for
they
leverage.
increased their building from 250 to 750, and they didn't ask for an extra dime, so that, I think, sets that idea that you're suggesting right to the trash can. So,
So let me ask you this. I chose 20% arbitrarily because we looked at that. I think that just as a scientific approach, maybe if you don't want 20%, maybe 10%, and see if at the end of next year we get a different return on our investment. We may go up. We may see that the less money we spend, the more return we get. But just to offer arbitrarily the same number, I don't think tests whether or not they're providing a good or service worth the $1 million that we hand over on a yearly basis.
well, and I don't have any problem coming up with something from the standpoint if you can come up with something to quantify it, but I can tell you, having been in business, in the retail business, quantifying promotion, quantifying advertising is the hardest thing in the world you can do. Because if I spent roughly $1,000 a week in advertising, and I couldn't tell you if I stopped advertising, if my business would go up or go down. You just don't know. And I know that one course that I don't remember much about college, or I remember a lot about college, but I don't remember a lot about courses that I took in college. One of the courses I took was advertising, and I can still remember the professor talking about how advantageous it is to advertise. And he used the example of Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola was number one then. That was 50 years ago, almost. And they're arguably still number one. But they've never stopped, never slowed down advertising. Now, if anybody could slow down or stop advertising and still have money coming in the door, you would think it would be Coca-Cola. Because the premise would be, if you stopped advertising today and you didn't advertise 6 months from now, you could make the argument that Coca-Cola is still going to be pulling in the dollars and still be number one. But you can, in hindsight, you can look at Woolworth and Kmart and Sears and see how that worked out. They cut back. They changed their policies, and they stopped spending money, and they're not number one anymore. There's always somebody willing to take your place. And God knows, look at all the competition Coke has had over the last 50 years.
I don't disagree with that argument, but I guarantee you Coke doesn't say we're going to hand over $300 million and, next year we're going to hand over $300 million in advertising. The year after we're going to hand over $300 million. They test if spending more returns a better result
Okay.
or
And
less.
so, like
and then
I said,
on top of that, they
let's
do
come up-
this.
Let's come up with some kind of a test. I don't know what that test would be.
I would think we almost should give the EDC more funds right now. And the day we're in, I think we need to keep economic development moving and jobs going. I know it's worthy of the conversation of cuts. I think the worst thing we can do right now is to start chopping our economic development. And, I've looked at their budget. It's not that high for what they do. And I know we do give them a big hunk of funds, but they've got astronauts on their boards. They have CPAs. They have business leaders, Carol Craig, and they all volunteer their time to help economic development into our community. So if you want to, y'all keep discussing it, I am not going to vote to cut the EDC at this time until we have enough jobs coming on to where we're promoting revenue. Or next year, the cuts we're going to do are going to be 10 times this, because we're going to have less funds, because we're not going to be having new businesses and people moving in.
Have you've seen the budget, so you've seen how much the employees make?
They do have a generalized area out. Commissioner Tobias, I didn't ask specifically how much each one makes, but the overall budget they do run for their operational costs, really, it seemed kind of consistent with what a business should be running. So I don't know, but then I'm not running their business. We're giving grants to a business and looking at their overall return on investments. But on that perspective, on the job they're doing, even up in my district, there was a few years ago, we didn't have any funds at all, and I didn't like the EDC at all because we didn't get any money up there. And, we were hit really hard. Well, over the last amount of time since we've been able to put some investment back into our community, we're starting to get new businesses into the area because we are able to offer incentives, and we have somebody working with us helping to get these types of jobs and industries in. Blue Origin came because of the zone. We were able to have some money, and we brought some funds in. And those jobs aren't even online yet. They haven't even started hiring. So we have Blue Origin, OneWeb, and these types of entities that really haven't even started putting jobs online yet. And there's going to be a great economic impact because some of it might roll back into the zone funds, but the MSTU funds on those taxes are still going to come into the county and help cover sheriff and library and those types of entities. So right now, I don't think this is a good day to cut back on the things that are actually producing into our county, or I really think next year we're going to have a list 10 times the size of this because we're not going to have any funds because it's going to get worse.
Let me just throw one other thing out there. The competition for these businesses is fierce. I mean, you've got 66 other counties that offer palm trees and sunshine in this state. There's a lot of companies and a lot of counties that would like to get the business we have. Not to mention there's probably, 40 other states that have some kind of space commission. And when you go to the Space Symposium in Colorado Springs, like I just did 2 weeks ago, and Jim, you were there, it'll blow you away how many countries are competing for the same dollars we're competing for. Russia was there this year. I've not seen them there before.
I didn't speak to a Russian. Just saying.
I'll go on record, I didn't either. And England is there, the UK is there, South American countries are there. It's just amazing how much competition there is for the dollar for these businesses to take, because these businesses, they bring a lot of money to the area. So getting them in your backyard is a big feather in these EDCs.
And it's and I'm asking, we heard Commissioner Nardi, you don't believe that could be handled just as well or potentially even better by having this type of economic development in-house?
I couldn't answer that yes or no, and I think it's a good question, and it's something that we can look at.
When we're talking with these organizations or these businesses that want to come in, you've got one individual or the EDC saying, we'll give you $8 million if you come here, and then we have an arm of the county that has, and this is what happened with South Carolina and the 737s there. They actually have a permitting office right in the building that, listen, here's the building director, and we will make sure that you are up and running within the next, 30 or 60 days, that we can offer certainty in construction as opposed to, $6 or $8 million, which is the change that these folks find, in the backseat of, the backseat of their car. I
need a car like that.
Yes. So this is something that came up a lot in the, a lot in campaign, as imagine as you were knocking doors as well, that people had issues on this. So, I think 20% was a lot softer than the 33, and I think that's a fair place to start. And if we find out it doesn't work, then we can look at that as we move forward. But I'd like to make a motion to cut funding to the EDC for 20%.
Commissioner Barfield?
Let's face it, this comes up how many times a year about EDC? It becomes a lot deeper than just, is it paying off? Are we getting our bang for the buck? It's an ideological issue, and quite frankly, I don't see that you could do this in-house. Just as in business, you go out and you hire a company to do a service. Like we went out with the golf courses. We have a company that does that, and now they've done well. The point is, you have to spend money within an organization who specializes in this. You also have to keep a distance so you can protect proprietary information. And that's a whole other issue, too, that I know keeps coming up. But I believe, just as Commissioner Pritchett, I said, we cannot back off on economic development. We cannot back off now. We have got to keep driving. We've got to keep pushing, because you know what? We're diversifying, too, in the type of businesses we have, and that's critical. We don't just have a shuttle program. Now we have, this economic development has gone well with Northrop Grumman. You've got Embraer. Embraer, when they came in, this board, we weren't on it yet, barely passed giving incentives to them. It was a 3-2 vote, and that was for less than 100 people. Now there's been 3 more elements there, and they're well over 1,000 employees once they finally finish their last element of it. These are things that we cannot back off on. We've got the south part of the county that's just building. We've got the north part of the county that's building. We've got companies in the central part. We are diversifying, and that's what's critical. And I just believe that we need to stick with it. We totally fund them this time. Next year we go around with this again, and we look at it again. But that's what I believe, and I think that's what we need to do.
Is that the worst second I've ever heard?
I think you're right. That was in Russian.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Tobias to cut 20% from the EDC. Do we have a second?
Well, crickets.
Motion fails. But, again, it's like everything else. There's no reason we can't talk about this next year, and given that thought, you've got a whole year to focus on that and convince us that
I hope
that we can.
as we move forward and do write the grant, that we provide a little bit more transparency, not into the proprietary stuff, the recruitment, but I think when it comes to salaries and travel, things that don't have an impact on, the businesses that do come here, but do have an impact on the taxpayers that spend $1.4 million, that we at least provide a little bit more of that.
Well, I can tell you that the travel is extremely important. That personal attention and face-to-face means a lot.
That information's out there. I mean, it's on 990, on guidestar.org. It shows salaries.
The EDC salaries?
Yeah, economic development. It's a 990. No, it shows the top levels.
I'm going to disagree with you on that
Okay.
one.
And
Okay.
I think I expressed many of my concerns with Linda Weatherman when I had her in my office and talking about, and she asked that I give her the opportunity to show. I have never, maybe it's because, whether on purpose or whether on just how we're laid out as a city, we had little dealings with the EDC in the South County for many years, but when we did, everything was very transparent. I mean, there was and we didn't have any money to offer them, so we weren't ever in that predicament where we were giving, cash away to big corporations, but, I told her how important that was to me, and I also told her that I thought this should be a function in-house. It will give us better controls, better transparency, and direction. They work for us directly. So, with that in mind, they've got to earn it and they've got to prove it. And it's not about, cutting the deal and make it. We can hire a lobbyist to do the same thing. That's got an expertise in economic development. Could do the same thing for less than $1.4 million. So they really got to prove themselves to me. And I'll give them a year to do it, at least as far as if they want my support next year.
Okay, moving to Brevard Cultural Alliance. We had an awful lot of people here today. By my count, 15. I may have missed a couple. Pleasure of the board. Thoughts, comments?
I threw out the cut. While I applaud all of the services that they provide, I just don't think art in public places arises to a need that is, more important than, I hate going back to this, but when we deal with Commission on Aging and Meals on Wheels, I think that probably is more a core service than government, and we decided to decrease that here in the near future, and I certainly think that it falls below the core core function of the infrastructure out there. Again, like you said, it's not sexy, but it's important, and I think it sends a bad message that we're supporting art in public places. And I've been to the Titusville Playhouse. It's absolutely wonderful. It is absolutely wonderful. You have a gem out there, and my parents frequent it all the time. But there's more people that partake in, our roads than do in the various programs of the Brevard Cultural Alliance. So this is one that I think that those $100,000 could or should be repurposed for infrastructure.
Any other thoughts?
I would just say that, they do serve a purpose. I mean, and I am the first one to cut every level of government as far as what we're doing as a government. But I would sooner, if you want to task me, if this board so desires, I'll find $100,000 in our budget or $100,000 in land that we're not using that will probably never be a park in order to fund this, because I believe that they do a good service. And again, I'm not an artsy person. Arts in public places is probably one of the very small things that they do. I mean, it is kind of a neat thing, but it's a very small thing, in my opinion, compared to the impact with the kids and with the programs that they provide. Again, I can talk to just about any resident that cares enough to come to a public meeting, and they've been touched by the BCA. And yeah, you want to call it a favor, call it what you will. I'll find another $100,000 to pull out of something else to support what they do, because I believe what they do is important.
Well, getting back to, let me play the devil's advocate now. Getting back to your words exactly, we need to fund raises. Is this $100,000, is that more important than raises for our directors or the firefighters or all the other people in the county that haven't had
But how much
raises?
impact does that $100,000 have, as far as, because I know that you've got that packet on our preliminary numbers on what those requests are, and this $100,000 is literally pennies on the,
Right.
in the
Well, and you
backseat
can
of the
say
car.
that for all of it. So is this an
Right.
exercise in futility, that we're taking away $10,000 from Lead Brevard and $10,000 from, or $25,000 away from my region membership? I mean, we shouldn't cut anything then, if that's what we're going to say, if it's pennies, because it's all pennies.
No, but you're talking
pennies-
about raises for employees, and
I know, but all the pennies add up. That's
but
my
the
point.
hundreds of employees we have, I mean, we would have to give raises across the board, is what I'm saying, and we wouldn't be able to do that with this. Again, I would be more than happy, and I have a suggestion, when we're done going through all this, it's something that we can look at doing possibly to help alleviate some of that
Is
burden on our
this a
budget.
compromise that we could look at and deal with the peel away that we did with the CBOs by, we saw some pretty prominent individuals that got up here, some folks that are the pillars of our, community as far as, going out there and fundraising and doing all those things. If we did a glide approach the same way we did with CBOs, and we said, hey, listen, can we take 20% and you can start to, fill that gap that government's playing, and we glide them into that approach? Is that something that would be more met with
Sounds-
favor?
Barfield, do you have any thoughts?
Yes. I don't know if we all got this letter from Dr. Slotkin, professor of economics at FIT. He put some study results in here that are pretty extensive. He says, our 2015 study estimated the total economic contribution of arts and cultural activity on the Space Coast economy at about $125 million in sales and about $71.3 million in terms of gross domestic product. I know there's been other studies and show what the direct benefits are of the cultural arts, but again, we get back to this thing of quality of life and services. For what we spend on the cultural arts and what we have to offer in this community, I think if we would cut that out, I think it would be a major impact. I just, some of the programs we've had, some of the things that they use, we've heard people talk about how it interacts with the community through schools, through special needs, through everything else. I just think it's something we shouldn't really mess with. I think we should keep it as it is.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Well, I'm kind of like Commissioner Isnardi on this. I don't get arts a lot. I know it's important. If it doesn't come with a ball to throw, I don't know why we're doing it. But it is important. And what I've realized is the millennials are drawn to these types of things, and there is a huge return on investment with them. And so I think it does generate revenues. We talked about workforce. We really don't have enough workforce now to take care of all the jobs coming in, hopefully, that we're going to be having. So we're going to have to start attracting new workforce, which is a good thing because they come with their families and we get more funds coming in that way. So this is one of those things that start enticing the younger families to come because these are the types of things they're looking for. So I think we should keep it because I think it's imperative to even attract the workforce along with the balls. So.
What's your thought on an incremental decrease?
My
Commissioner?
thought is that would be the way to go. If you took $20,000 away from them, they'd still have $80,000, they'd still be functioning. And again, when the county can ever right itself and we're awash in cash, they and the other people that we're cutting from can come back and...
And that's an acceptable compromise, at least for me. I mean, if you want my, I'm okay with compromise.
Commissioners, you want to make the motion? I'll second it. It'll be a first.
I'm the chair. You'd have to
Oh,
make the motion.
darn it. Okay.
You can pass the gavel.
Okay, yeah, I'll make a motion to decrease funding by 20%.
Starting next year or this year?
Your call.
Sooner this year.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Tobias to cut $20,000 from Brevard Cultural Alliance starting this year. We have a second.
I'll second.
I have a second by Commissioner Isnardi. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nay?
Nay.
Passes 3-2. Commissioner Barfield and Commissioner Pritchett are the nay votes.
So this year is
coming-
17-18, because this year is 16-17.
No, the coming year, the coming
17,
budget.
18.
17.
Yeah, 17, sorry, yeah.
Okay, that completes that page.
Yeah, which goes to the Community Action Agency, which is HHS.
Community Action Agency.
That's the long sheet.
Oh, okay, over here.
But don't worry, that middle section is that's all tied together.
Okay.
And Mr. Golden you talked about that last time. It's been last workshop, is that correct?
Yes, the last budget workshop, we did talk about the Community Action Agency as part of our overall department. I would point out a couple of things about your sheet. Number one, that first position.
Why don't you start and tell them, refresh their memory on just exactly what
Community Action Agency is a mixture of general fund and grant fund dollars. The actual total budget for the program is about $2.1 million. And we actually provide services directly to low-income families in crisis. The emergency services that you see on this page are really a lifeline for clients. I've got multiple stories about the families that we serve. Primarily, a large majority of them, we keep them from being homeless. And again, for emergency services, you can come once a year. Once you've come, you have to take a budgeting class before you can approach us again. We do a program called LIHEAP, Low Income Home Energy Assistance. That is a federally funded program that offers assistance to electric bills. We have a program called Family Self-Sufficiency, which is also federally funded, and both of those programs flow through Department of Economic Opportunity at the state level. Family Self-Sufficiency is actually basically a job training program to look at trying to break the cycle of poverty. So we're able to go in and work directly with families. As with all of our other services, no payments are actually made directly ever to a client. If there is a payment that's made, it's directly made to the agency, whether it's FPL, whether it's a mortgage company, so on and so forth. Yeah, and on this sheet, the first position that you have there under Community Action Technician, $55,536 is not the actual salary. What happened is when we ran the Z-Pay program, we had just had a person change positions, and so she was in Z-Pay twice, and they mistakenly added up both salaries for her.
So it's only 20?
It's
27.
about $27,768. They make about the same.
Okay. Well, thank you for that clarification. My understanding, as I got from your office, and you were very helpful, and I greatly appreciate that, this was $281,409 of non-leveraged dollars?
Correct. Those
So
are
this is direct dollars to cover people's rent?
not just
and-
rent.
Or mortgage?
We do mortgage, there are prescriptions that we pay for. We have an example of a woman who's on Social Security who
I'm
had
sure,
been.
yeah, these are all
Yeah.
anecdotal,
And
I'm
so
sorry, but.
we did help with prescriptions.
Yeah, great.
And we also do water because that's not covered by.
Super. And I have, and help me, when I asked that question, I got 262 clients that you've served year-to-date. Is that,
That is year-to-date. Last year, when you look at a full year, I
Okay.
believe it was 641.
okay. So, in other words, with all of the employees as well as the direct assistance, the 281,400, is that year-to-date? That's last year, how much was spent on mortgage, other people's mortgage payments, is that correct?
The 281 has been consistent for probably 7 or 8 years or
So
more.
that's the budget.
Okay.
So that entire budget was spent the prior year, you're correct.
Okay. Okay.
The other thing that if I could, I don't mean to interrupt, to just point out, the positions that you have listed here, other than the first two, they are directly tied to emergency services. The rest of the positions actually also support the rest of the grant funding that comes into community action.
Super.
So this is, you've got on here just the general fund portion of those salaries or of those positions.
So there would need to be a little bit of a finagling or switching. I see what you're saying, if that was the case. But the 281, the most important part, the time that county taxpayers are paying mortgages for people that, for one reason or another, don't pay their mortgage or don't pay their power bill, is 281 plus a certain number of FTE. Is that a fair assessment? That's non-leveraged with.
It is non-leveraged. I would say that I would characterize it differently in that they are not choosing to not pay their mortgage. Most of the people that we see are having a crisis of some point, of some kind, and we actually don't pay the mortgage using that or rent for everyone who comes in the door. One of the things that we do as staff is, if we're going to help you, you have to prove to us that you're going to be able to continue to make the
Well,
payments.
yeah, I appreciate it, but it's taxpayers, let's be honest. It's not you, it's taxpayers through involuntary contributions, through a whole number, we're deciding, whether arbitrarily or not, choosing the, 281,000 direct dollars that are being handed to pay people's mortgage for, I'm sure you can pick out some real horrific ones, but the reality of the situation, there's a small number of individuals that are being helped for a large amount of money. So, again, I think we need to put this in perspective to the amount of dollars that are expended on, I hate to go back to it, but the Council on Aging and the Meals on Wheels program, if you look at the dollars we expend and the return we get in the number of citizens there versus the hundreds of thousands of dollars here, and again, sorry, how many did you say? 600? 600. So I just don't think it's a wise use of tax dollars. So I'm more than willing to play with this, and I appreciate your help, but I think that, so my mind, to make this a little bit more clear, would be to zero out the 281,409 as well as any FTE that went to the administration of said funds.
Ian, can you give us just some stories or some instances of how this works? Because it's not like you're just handing out money.
Correct.
Or handing out this or handing out. I'd like to just know, go through, explain a little bit more about situations or family situations and things that are affected and why this works.
And I do. There are many, many stories that we could discuss. I'll pick a couple that I have. We had 2 sisters who came into the office. Their mother had just died. Mother was the breadwinner, paid all the bills. They came to us to basically, they had found jobs. They were going to be starting to get paychecks, but they were looking at being evicted because they couldn't make that bridge to that first paycheck. We had another woman who's on Social Security. whose son had been helping her with her mortgage, her prescriptions. He had a crisis. And so there was a month that he was not able to help her, and we paid prescription and mortgage. We had another woman who had a full-time job as a teacher, was laid off, could only find work as a substitute. Her and her children would have been evicted. She'd gotten a second job, but again, waiting for that paycheck and that bridge, that gap, that lifeline, if you will, to just make that so they weren't homeless and then drawing on other services.
So you're not giving handouts, you're giving them a hand up. You're giving them something, where they can be productive and they're not going to end up draining the system
Right.
on other things if they can't.
And I would say is characteristic of the program. Like I was trying to say earlier, what we look at is, in those instances, if there was not evidence that they would be able to continue to make, whether it's rent, mortgage, so on and so forth, we would not have provided that assistance.
And it's a one-time shot.
And a one-time shot.
Sorry, once a year?
Once a year,
So
but
how
it's
many
only one time if you never go and take the budgeting class.
Okay, so how many of your clients come back, a decent percentage? What's the recidivism rate?
Yeah, I don't know that I have that right in front of me.
But before they
some
can come
do.
back again, they have to take a budgeting class through the Extension Center.
Okay, so unfortunately, sometimes it's not one and out. It's just a once a year and out until next year. Is that a fair assessment that some of your clients?
I would not be able to say yes or no until I actually went and pulled some data on that.
So my argument is this is quite a bit of money that is, A, not being leveraged, and B, whether it's a handout or I don't think that this is a place of Brevard County's taxpayers to make this. I think this is where, charitable organizations, faith-based organizations step in and help. In these austere times, I think that this is not a core function of government, and that's why I would love to sit down and make the correction so it's only the FTE tied to that, as well as, the office supplies and all that other stuff. I didn't mean to redline it all, but just the stuff that was directly tied to that. Help me, how much is tied to that 281? I mean, rough estimate, if I was to get this support.
Honestly, other than the two FTEs that I mentioned at the very top, which would be, instead of 55, it'd be another 27 and the 27,768, it is very hard to break out for copier and, the general liability and office supplies, how much are directly
Okay.
emergency services.
Okay, so it's at least $330,000.
Yes.
At a minimum, this is $330,000. That helps 600 folks a year.
641.
So, I mean, that's our entire community-based or the better part of our community-based organization that helps thousands and thousands. So that's the perspective I looked at that on, and the reason I went, in this direction.
Board, thoughts?
That's an interesting perspective, because that's exactly what I was thinking when you said it, was that, for what we cut or what we are cutting over the next 5 years, that seems like we're getting a much bigger return on that investment. And I don't even know that I agree with all these organizations. I know they all do good, but, if we're comparing to the CBOs, I have a bleeding heart too, and I take out my checkbook quite a bit, but that's not about me, what I do personally. But I think, is there criteria? Not just, as far as, you make sure that they can pay it next month or next week or whatever. Is it criteria, or is there like a lot of subjective judgment involved with how we help?
It is not subjective. There is a policy that we have that and excuse me, I have a cold I'm
That's okay.
recovering from. But there is a policy, there's eligibility that each of the clients have to meet. We check their income. They have to bring that back up in. We do third-party verification. They also have to bring in, if we're helping them with their rent, their mortgage, or their utility bill, we actually see that actual bill. So there is several levels of eligibility that is used to determine whether or not they qualify for the service.
Do we have like an average dollar amount? I mean, rather than dividing it by 660?
Yeah, and it's tough because, again, there's rent, there's mortgage, there's prescriptions, there's utilities. If
Right.
you just do a straight line computation, I think it's about 436 per person.
Okay.
I can tell you of that 641, we helped 345 with rent, 286 with utility, and 10 with prescription. So that's why you can't just divide it by that number, because of course the prescription wouldn't
Yeah.
be the same amount as a mortgage
Oh,
or
of
rent.
course, of course.
Well, to me, it looks like we're seeing a trend. I mean, Commissioner Tobias originally starts with cutting, cuts Meals on Wheels and all that. Now he wants to, and then also based on this, he wants to cut the health department. Now he wants to cut, those who are in need. So I guess what we're trying to say is you really, anybody who's really in need and can't take care of themselves or have issues, that's what we're targeting. That's what it looks like we're doing here. So I'm totally opposed to this. I mean, we talk about quality of life and keeping services, level of services. When you start really damaging the constituents that we have, and you damage them by not giving them a chance, you're going to hurt our community. And it's going to put more people in tough situations, and it impacts our community. So I think, any community, everybody is not like we are in ways that we can financially sound. But you know what? Any person is one decision away from catastrophe. And, there's times when bad things happen to people. And so it's things like this that get that one shot that can get somebody over that edge. And trust me, I mean, we've been through a tough time. We've had a tough economic time. And, I am all for not giving handouts. I just don't. But there's that time when there's no other option. And so I believe that's something that we owe to our citizens, to keep people off the street, keep people, employed. There's just a time when those things happen. And I don't know who else is doing it. We can say the churches are. But you know what? The churches, only 34% of the people in our county are even associated with a church. And that includes the children. That's based on a Pew study that shows that. And then if you do depend on the churches, you're going to depend on the churches, but you know what? They volunteer a lot. And I give to various different organizations, but you know what? There's still some that just can't, it doesn't get to them. And who's going to take care of them? Who's going to take that one shot for them? And you know what? That's what we're here for. I mean, as community leaders, those are the type of things that we need to be sensitive to, and we need to understand that, you know what? There are those in need, and it's that one little shot can make a huge difference in somebody's life and somebody's family. So, okay, I'm off my soapbox now.
I work in a faith-based organization, and we do help with utilities and rent. It's overwhelming. We don't have enough funds to take care of all of them. There's not enough churches to take care of all of it. 4 or 5 years ago, when we had the crisis, the big belt across the state of Florida was homeless children and families, and it was a huge problem. So we started going to a lot of homeless seminars because it affected our community. We had a lot of parents with their children living in cars, and we found out about it because we were the church, but they weren't telling authorities because they didn't want to lose their kids. So we had a real crisis. So we started going to some homeless seminars, and what we had found out, that if you have one person in society that's homeless, it actually, the numbers came in, astounded me. It costs $50,000 to $70,000 on a community for that person because of emergency room care and police and certain types of numbers they brought up. So they said the cost on your community to have someone homeless was huge. And they said, and then if you have a family, it's even bigger. And then something else that really hit me is if you've got a child that suffered homelessness, they almost have a 0 chance of recovering from it. That the odds are almost 0% that those children will ever attend college. And so that just kind of got my attention a bit. But not only that, if you're even going to do the counting side of it, it's going to almost cost us more having a homeless person than maybe doing a one-time getting them in. And I agree, Mr. Tobias, we shouldn't be paying someone's rent on and on, because this is where I struggle. I don't mind helping people who can't help themselves, elderly and children. I really resent helping people on and on that just are not helping themselves. but I think that's like almost a federal problem. But if we've got a one-time thing where we're coming in and helping one time with rent, 'cause that's what we do at the church, because otherwise they'd be getting evicted, then we have a homeless situation, then they got to come up with first and last and all these types of deposits to get in. So this might almost be like a worthy thing to do, because it's probably saving us a big amount of money on the other side of it, of trying to take care of a homeless family or homeless person with the amount of services we're going to have to give as a community with taxes. I'm not an expert on it, but we went through some seminars, and there's probably somebody who knows more than me about it, but those are the numbers they came back with.
I have a quick question. Since this is the budgeted amount, do you typically run out like 3/4 through the year? Or do you try to space it out to last the 12 months? Because I know you probably run out of funding for the ASS anyway.
You're correct, we would run out of funding, and we do try to space it out, so it does last the entire fiscal year.
So do we do that by like trying to limit who we help, or do we do that by, because I'm sure people are asking if they're aware.
We limit it by doing a set amount each month, and so once we reach that amount for the month, we're done.
So you just tell people, I'm sorry, we're out for the month?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And we do that with our other grant dollars, too.
Okay.
And speaking of what you were talking about, Commissioner, these are, since they're general fund dollars, you could impose any of those type of limits. You know, right now, we say you can come back if you take a budgeting class, but you can say it's one time and that's forever.
And see, the only thing that concerns me about that is it's not a crisis of somebody who is helping somebody with their bills. You're requiring them to take a budget class. So to me, it sounds like they're having trouble controlling their finances when we're imposing a budget class on them.
We started imposing that class because we did see some repeat clients, and so we wanted to think outside of the box of how can we help them. We want them to be self-sufficient and self-sustaining. So maybe it is a budgeting problem that you've never had a budgeting class. So that was just our team trying to think outside of the box.
Right, and I don't fault you for that at all. I don't, because obviously if you're budgeted the amount, you're going to distribute the funding. But I'm wondering, because it's not classes on, or it's not how to get a job or how to write a resume, and I'm not that that's obviously not your job to do that either. But the first thing that we come up with is a budgeting class, and that's a little bit of a red flag to me.
It wasn't, I don't think we really saw that many in emergency services repeating. What we were seeing is some of those grant-funded programs, we were seeing repeats in those. So we thought outside the box. We said, okay, we'll put a program in place where you have to take a budgeting class before you come back for any service. Our funding sources said that we could not do that. So we left the requirement in place on the general funded because they don't have any say over those. So that's why it's in place for this program.
So how much grant funding do you get that help pay, that does pay for the
The
certain?
total is probably about, what, 1.6 or so?
Right, we get 1.1 million in LIHEAP, that's the energy that helps with your FPL bill or your gas. And we receive 424,000 with CSBG, that's our self-sufficiency grant. And those are federal grants, and we have to follow their guidelines for eligibility.
How much of this particular fund, how much do you leverage? You get how much from us, 500?
Well, and again, that 509 is including positions that cover and work on those grants also.
Right. So my question is, how much, in a typical year, how many grants, or how much grant money do you get? How does this 500,000 leverage?
It's, if I understand the question correctly, it's difficult to get at that. The emergency services, Commissioner Tobias is correct. The emergency services dollars really don't leverage additional dollars. What they're leveraging is that ripple effect in the community if you do have somebody who goes into homelessness because they don't have this lifeline. The other 200 and some odd $1,000 of those additional positions, the software, janitorial services, that's what keeps the entire office operating, which allows us to maintain and operate the other 1.6 million in grant dollars. For example, the supervisor that's on here at 33,000, that's not her entire salary. That's just the general fund portion of her salary. It's about 60%, or do I have it backwards?
62% is general fund and 38% is grant.
So there's a portion of positions that we charge the grants whenever we can, and that's true of everyone in the entire department. But in that instance, you need her entire position to continue, because she still needs to supervise the remaining staff, even if emergency services and those 2 positions aren't there. There's still another 8 or 9 positions that she oversees, and you still have to have that supervision. So technically, those dollars really do leverage that 1.6 or so in grant dollars, if you followed that
I
convoluted.
do, and I'm just, and you and I have had this discussion before, I'm old, and when I was a kid growing up, we didn't have all these programs, and somehow we made it. I mean, I had patches on my knees and rubber bands around my shoe to keep my sole from flapping, but I just don't know how we got from there to here, where government's involved in helping all these people. It boggles my mind. I don't know.
So I just want to be really clear, and I appreciate you, that I'm only, you brought up there is leveraging here, quite a large amount of leveraging, and I don't want to interfere with any of that leveraging. So I'm only interested, forget the handout I have, I'm glad these worksheets, I'm only interested in that roughly $330,000 that would, as you've stated, have no impact on any of that grant funding. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so forget the 509, just add the 281,409 plus the roughly 55,536. So forget all the red in the middle. Those are the only 2, and again, that would, according to Mr. Golden, have no impact, 0 impact on all that other, which does supply resources for
Power bills.
LIHEAP
is electric bills, and then the community services block grant is our self-sufficiency, which is basically a job training program.
Okay, so these folks would have other resources.
The ones they would not have access to the same resources that emergency services provides. So if
They still would have, they still have power, access to a light, they would have access to help them find a job or write a resume or do those other things, is that correct?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
So the only things not covered by the SSG or the FPL funding, basically, that 1.1 million would be like prescriptions, mortgage and rent payments, that kind of stuff.
Yes, ma'am.
That's correct.
And there were 10 prescriptions?
10 prescriptions last year.
Okay, so, and then, sorry, I know you said it, and I wasn't taking, how many mortgage payments or rent payments?
345
Okay.
Wow.
and 286 utility, that's water.
Oh, okay, water is there.
Right,
Okay, so
because we have a
which is
grant
not-
for
Which is not
lights,
covered.
so we don't use the general fund for
Great.
FPL.
Okay.
All right, do we want to do something with this?
So I'll throw a motion to end funding for the direct client emergency services at $281,409, plus the 2 FTE that equal, you said about $55,536?
Yes.
Correct.
That to zero that out for the next budget cycle.
Salary.
Okay, I'm not going to repeat that. Mr. Tobias made a motion, and I think we understand what it is, but,
For the non-leveraged,
right, the
fund.
non-leveraged dollars. Do we have a second?
Why are you looking at me automatically?
No, I'm just going both ways.
Yeah, because again, and I want to remind everyone here, and again, the board, I mean, when we talk about CBOs, the only thing that we ever talk about is the $60,000 for Meals on Wheels. So I would ask Commissioner Tobias, if you're going to eliminate that, or I'll support eliminating that, if you commit $60,000 of that to Meals on Wheels in perpetuity until the board changes it. And maybe that will stop that conversation and that, I mean, is that a bit ridiculous to ask? I know.
All I
maybe-
can do is
Yeah.
vote in favor of that. I can't make that
Right, of
commitment,
course,
obviously.
of course. What
Clearly,
I'm
I have
saying,
no
though,
control over this
what I'm
board.
saying, though, is that keeps coming back, and it's all about the Meals on Wheels. So, I mean, we can always, as a board later on, address that, but I think, cutting it off all at once may be a bit extreme, the 281. I mean, if we have 2 employees that won't be using another program, we won't be using them for anything else but this $281,000?
Those 2 employees also do the eligibility for the cremations, the county's mandated cremations and burials of indigents. But other than that, those 2 employees are just emergency services.
Maybe there's a middle ground. I mean, I know.
Are there vacancies in HHS?
We have a vacant secretary position that we are currently advertising for in CAA.
That roughly pays how much?
26.
Which is
Line
almost
this up.
which is within $1,000 of what that position pays, correct?
Yes, so the secretary is 26,228. The Community Action Agency Tech is 27,768. The secretary is a vacant position right now.
So there would be only one loss of FTE.
I mean, and this is a hard thing to say, but we're not an employment agency anyway. As much as I don't like to cut any positions, you have to look at it from our, like a budget perspective. I mean, I agree. I think we've gotten to a point, and this may be a philosophical or an ideological thing, but we've gotten to a point where we've gotten so dependent on government to take care of these things because we know they exist. And just by having this meeting and probably an article in Florida today, again, talking about Meals on Wheels and the horrific behavior of a couple of us commissioners, I think that, maybe the public does need to be aware that these community agencies, which are in the CBOs, maybe need to be picking up on some of this stuff. Maybe we need to do more as a community to take care of people than we have been, and maybe people need to depend a little less on their local government to pay for this stuff. The prescription stuff scares me a little bit, but if it's 10 prescriptions, maybe we can give them one of those national prescription coverage cards, and we can help them out that way. But if it's all or nothing, I'm going to vote to eliminate. It's all second.
I'm thinking.
How many single mothers do you have with children getting assistance from you?
I don't have the totals for,
That's most of the ones we get at the church, and we can't help all of them. I just, if we work, I would love to see everybody working with jobs. You're telling me they have jobs and they come in for one-time things, they've hit a hitch. I like that. If you tell me you've got someone that doesn't have a job and they're consistently coming in, I would ask you to revisit that and should change the method that you're handing out funds with, because I think that's something we should not do. But if you've got I'm telling you, this is where we live. We have created this. We have single moms with kids getting no child support because the state of Florida had this brilliant idea to do 50-50, and the guys aren't paying for the kids, so we are. So we've got moms with kids, and they're struggling, and like if they run into one bad month or something happens, the kids are sick, they miss a month of work, you're going to have a homeless mom with kids. And I'm not willing to do that at this point, just cut this off. I just see the overall picture because I work in it. And there's just not enough faith-based organizations to take care of this. We got to fix this as a society. We're going to have to make a lot of changes out there. But even if they cut the assistance at the federal level, we're going to have so many homeless people unable to take care of themselves. They can't even do that overnight. So this is going to be a process. But I think cutting this would just be a terrible thing to do altogether. I think I would like to have this discussion again next year to come back and revisit it if it doesn't pass. But I would highly recommend that we don't give out assistance more than once. And I think if you've got young single people, I don't think we should be necessarily helping them out. I think it should go to families primarily with children. My opinion. That's my humble opinion.
I think that's a slippery slope.
I know it does. I know.
I will tell you that without having the ability to go look at the statistics of the 9 stories that I brought, 4 are single moms, the rest are elderly or disabled.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Again.
Gosh. You know, I'm so torn. Because, like Mr. Barfield, I'm all about giving people a hand up. But at the same time, if we have $280,000 worth of programs that aren't really going to affect all the other things that you guys are doing, how about if we have it? How about if we split the baby and then revisit it next year?
That's right, you can't make a motion, can you? I will,
What's the impact?
would that allow you to serve, is that a fair estimate to say if you cut it, would you then be allowed to serve half as many?
So just cut the
clients?
281 in half
Yes.
And the one FTE?
and 1 FTE?
I'd say you roughly would cut services in half. It's, again, very difficult to say because of the types of services, but it roughly.
But you get other funding for a majority of those other services with FPL and the SSG. So you
Right, we
would,
get-
you would cut the services that this provides.
Correct.
Not
Right.
that,
Not all of them,
this
correct.
1.1 million and this
Right,
424.
it'd be cutting that 641 that I spoke to, not
Well,
the entire 3,600.
because I don't want anybody to get the impression that we're still not doing a lot with the grant funding that we have. It's just, perhaps if we do go this route and we half it, then we limit what we do with the half.
Right.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Might as well pull off the Band-Aid. This is going to be
We do
painful.
serve probably another 3,000 clients through those other grants. So all total, Community Action served about 3,600 clients last year. So there will still be 3,000 clients being served with electric.
And I bet you if I asked you right now, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, if I said to you, if I gave you another $500,000, you would say you would use every penny of it, correct?
Yes.
For the number of
Yes.
calls you get? Okay, so at what point do we say, and we have to stop? I'm not saying, I'm not saying that I'm not willing to compromise, but I think at some point you have to say, when is enough enough? So, I hope as a community, people start stepping up, and I think that we've gotten away from that as a country, but that's a cultural thing, and that's a shame. But I've paid a mortgage as a single parent. I've had WIC, and I'm not ashamed to admit it, as a single parent, paying a mortgage, working 2 jobs, and busting my tail to make sure that I paid my rent and my utilities. So I'm not saying I was a perfect human being, but it's tough being on your own. But, you pull yourselves up by the bootstraps, and sometimes you eat a lot of ramen noodles, but you do whatever it takes, and
Well, and that's what the programs that you have offer, because you're not giving them handouts, you're giving them an opportunity to bounce back and get on their feet. It's a one-time deal,
Yes, sir.
which is the only thing I really like about it.
And the further impact, which I forgot, is that we have an office that's in Melbourne and in Cocoa. So we have an emergency services tech in Melbourne and one in Cocoa to help serve the county. So if we were to cut that by 1 FTE, we would not be able to staff both locations. So we would just have to probably centralize them in Cocoa.
Would that further decrease?
No, sir, the health
You still need
department,
We don't pay for space down in Melbourne.
the health
But-
department gives us space.
Help me, you're going through a paperless transition because of a space, sort of, at a pretty expensive cost, $8,000 roughly, we're going to discuss here, $8,000 a year? Would this allow us to push that off?
That cost that we have budgeted for in community action is not, it's going to be 8,000. We're estimating that that's going to be, because you have to buy servers, you have to buy the attachment to the printer, you have to get all of those things, but those will hopefully be one-time costs. We think it might have to be multiple phases, but we're going to be working with the IT department to get all that ironed out.
Okay.
We've set aside these dollars in this year's budget to start that
I
process.
was just trying to find you more space is all.
Right.
So, Chairman, would you like me to amend my motion? or-
Well, let me just ask one other question. If we don't eliminate the FTE, then you would be able to keep the other office open?
That's correct, sir.
If we have adequate revenue sources right now, we're getting everything done. I know we're going through cuts. I don't know why this is imperative for us to do this right now. Let me throw this out again. You create one homeless family, you're creating $70,000 of tax-based funds having to take care of them for medical, emergency services and legal services. That's the numbers they came back with, was the average per person for every homeless person. And I think George Taylor actually put a lot of that to the test by getting all the veterans into homes. I think it cut down a lot of those emergency care costs. So, we're running the risk. We're going to save some funds here, but we have a potential here. If you're spending $600 on a family, keeping them in their home for paying a month's mortgage, you're running a potential of $70,000 a year, having them out, not being able to find a place to live again, because then they'll get so far in the hole, it's hard to dig them out. So, not that I think that we should be here forever. People need to get work and get jobs, but I just don't know, even from the accounting standpoint, this is a good investment to do this.
Do you track the success of these families?
I'm not sure that we do
Three
any
months
longer.
later, do we know that they're not?
Not for emergency services. We do that through the Family Self-Sufficiency Program. I will say, though, that if you do decide to have the dollars, we would still probably look at eliminating one of the 2 FTEs, just because having 2 with half the dollars.
Yeah.
And then we would probably look at just having that office open maybe one day a week down in in Melbourne, and then potentially up in Titusville. And just have that position travel or...
If a condition of one of your federal grants is that once somebody comes back the second time, that they have to take a budget class, odds are the statistic, I think that's what you said.
That's what we tried to do. What they actually told us was that they would not allow that.
Okay, but that was your take on it, that perhaps they could use a budget class, because you were
Yeah.
seeing repeat people. So, just based on I'm not saying that everybody doesn't get in a bind. Like I said, I just put my whole life out there to you in a few seconds. But, I think, again, I could give you $1 million and you could spend it all. So there's always a story, and there's always a case. And I think it's up to us to take care of our communities, and it's up to us to raise money for those agencies that are spending the money properly, and it's up to us to help that family in need. And until we start doing that, we're just going to create a culture that, where people are dependent on those dollars. Maybe we should be having classes, or we should look into having classes and teaching people how to budget. We should, have classes on teaching people how to do a job interview and those kinds of things. That's actually stuff that will stick with somebody for a long time. But, I'm not,
If we're only giving
I
them-
think we're like so
If we're
far in
only
the
giving it to them
weeds.
one time, we're not we're not creating a
But
handout.
if they could
where
come
people-
back, they would, because we were trying to make them go through a budget class because
Yeah.
we were getting
And we're
repeat calls.
we're
I'm not going to
measuring-
beg you to
We're
vote.
not measuring the success rate, which is, I understand that you can't do it. So I'm not leveling anybody, but we don't know that 2 months later down the road, and I understand you do your best for screening, but you just told us you can't measure 2 months later that they're not, out on the streets. So we have no measure of success here. Zero.
Or failure.
Yeah.
But let's make a decision, because, this
Yep.
day's getting long, and it's not going to change anybody's mind at this point.
So you're saying take out the FTE? If we want to do it, might as well take out the FTE too?
You're going to cut it in half? Yes.
Well, the motion's for the full, the 2 FTEs and the
I can't go for that, so.
so your discretion would be, okay, so then I will amend my motion for half of, so whatever that is, $140,704.50, if my math is, half of the 281,409, and then 1 FTE to lower that. That would be my motion then.
And I'll second.
Well, I've never hated voting for something in all my life, but I'm just this far over the line to vote for it, so I'm going to do it before I change my mind. All those in favor of John Tobias' motion to cut these numbers in half, vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Passes 3-2. Commissioners Barfield and Pritchett vote no.
What was that? 54, 500 something there.
I'm sorry, say again, stop.
154, 500. No, it's more than that, because it's a full FTE.
Correct.
And then half of the 281,
And that's not
right?
included.
Correct.
Okay, we got it.
Do we want to keep going, or do we want to call this a day?
Got a lot more to do, let's keep going.
Let's keep going.
Should we stay?
Did I say that too loud?
Okay, what's next?
We're going to do both next, or do you want to go?
Does he want to still do
Want to do
health?
these two while we're here? or go forward?
There's still items on the list.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll handle the next two. The next two is the operating, which is the paper list that we,
Medical examiner.
oh, sorry, also the travel, but, you know, I'm sorry, I'm missing the medical examiner.
Well, we have operating and the move to paperless under community action.
Okay.
And then we also.
That's
had
the medical
budgeted-
examiner.
budgeted
So you want to wait till the medical examiner on that one?
we can.
That would probably make more sense. Okay, so the next one is the travel. And that one I had to cut because I was still waiting for a response, and it might be out of your hands on, I understand that there's mileage that you incur, which I understand, but I didn't get any. I think on March the 13th and April the 5th, my office asked out-of-county travel, who, what, where, when, cost breakdowns. I didn't get that as far as the $3,500. Do you have that available?
That's mileage.
That is mileage, and we did get a response back from your office that you weren't interested in in-county
So
travel.
Okay, so all of that is mileage?
Correct, sir.
It's not events or anything like that?
Correct.
Okay, so then I'd like to, I mean, you're checking on client services and all that, and you've made the economic decision that it's better to reimburse than it is to use a county vehicle?
Correct.
Okay, so I'd like to pull that. Which gets us to 211.
So 211. Mr. Tobias, since you're leading the charge on these, what are your thoughts on that?
They do provide a service above and beyond what you could get from calling any of our offices, because they are, from my understanding, 24 hours. But many of the services, they are an intermediary in order to get government services one way or another. So I put down the full cut, the $28,800, and I understand we get a pretty good bang for the buck, but you can just as easily call your office with your staff or my office and get my staff, you know, during the regular work. So I would not be opposed to not zeroing it out, maybe covering part of it so they could have access to those government services at, you know, 6 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night or 3 o'clock in the morning should they need those government services, though I don't know how you could, you know, use that information, but I'm sure that there's probably a way. So I would amend that 28.8 down to 14.4.
Thoughts?
I think we need to keep it as it is, because, I mean, they provide a valuable service for suicide prevention and all kinds of other things. And it's 211. They also provide a good role as far as emergency operations and center and a whole lot of other things, too. They make sure they get the word out on different things. I mean, for that amount, I'd like to also know what would happen if we did cut it in half. So,
We have
Got
a,
a question?
yes.
Okay. That amount funds the better part of a position. It's a person who answers calls, so it's a direct service position. If we have one less position, and we actually have 8, and we staff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So it's a significant cut, and that's probably 8,000 or 10,000 calls we may not be able to answer.
How many calls again?
We logged about 42,000, a little bit more than 42,000 last year. We are a little bit higher than that. We're tracking a little bit higher this year. Now, that's partly because of the storm. We answered about 4,000 calls related to the storm. We've also added text interaction capacity without adding staff, so we don't know exactly what those numbers are going to be because we're building that. And we also didn't answer all the calls that came in. If people would spread themselves out, we'd be fine, but, they call when they call. So it would definitely have an impact on our ability to respond to the people who are calling us. It would also impact our ability to do those other things, like with emergency management. It's part of our basic capacity.
What was your most common call today? I know you gave me a whole breakdown.
I've been here all day, I don't know.
Yesterday.
It varies. Our most common calls overall are basic needs calls. They're very much the kinds of things that you've heard people talk about today. People who most of the people we hear from are working. They're working low-paying, part-time, a couple of part-time jobs. Somebody got sick, their car broke down, something happened, and now they can't pay their rent, they can't pay their utilities, they can't pay for the medicine they need, those kind of things. That's about 30% of our calls overall are those basic needs calls. The next close to 30% are health-related. And the bigger part of that is behavioral health. So it's people with mental health issues. That's where the suicide calls fit in, substance abuse issues. Those calls certainly run the gamut. I mean, people can have mental health problems if they're very wealthy or have substance abuse problems or those kind of things. So that's not necessarily a socioeconomic. The primary health tends to be more about, I don't have insurance, I can't afford to see someone, I need dental care, I don't have any dental insurance, I don't have the money, I have a bad tooth, those kind of things. After that, it's a wide variety of things that people call about: government services, legal services, domestic violence. It's kind of across the board.
And your job, just so I get this straight, is to direct them to the appropriate contact?
That's
so
part
if I
of our
call
job.
if I call and say I'm suicidal, how do you handle that phone call? Do you have a I don't know.
I will
Sorry.
tell you, our staff are all trained in crisis intervention. We're part of a national network, actually. There's a National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. It's an 800 number. If someone with a 321 area code dials that number, it's routed to our center. So all of our staff do risk assessment. We work with people to try to identify what that level of risk is. If it's a high risk, if it's an imminent risk, if it's somebody who's already impaired, who's telling us they have lethal means at hand, we will try to engage with law enforcement to get someone out to do an assessment and get them safe. If it's a lower lethality risk, what we will do is talk to them about what they can do to keep themselves safe. It's called safety planning. We engage with them. We do follow-up with them over time to find out what else can we do or can you do to keep yourself safe, and check in with them, as well as try to connect them to mental health services for ongoing treatment and support. And we do some of that kind of follow-up for other kinds of programs that are not funded by this grant, but are made possible in part by this grant. So we have about $300,000 in grant funds that came in the last year to do follow-up and more active intervention with veterans, families of young children, people with specialized health care needs, and homeless, people who are either homeless or at risk of becoming homeless. Anything else?
Thank you.
I was just going to say, I used to work for an agency like this, and I told her when she came in, this is many, many moons ago when I was a high school student, and so I already knew what she did, because, we received the majority of our funding through the United Way. And it is a good service, because if somebody doesn't know who to call, or even if they're just calling for information, you're able to save staff a lot of time, because you can look up a phone number in a database as opposed to kicking them around, because there's nothing more frustrating as a resident, or, even our office gets some crazy calls sometimes. I think this helps, bypass some of this stuff. So they do provide a valuable service, and for such a small commitment, for what the return is large. So, I would support to keep funding this, because I know how much work they do. I mean, if it was one employee running the whole show, of course, it would be a little silly, but they have 8 people that they've committed.
So keep it.
Commissioner Pritchett.
I say probably keep it. I don't,
I can count to 3. So let's move on to that.
Well, yeah, we can move on to the next, but, this is just really, really illustrating the point that I've been making for a long time. The reason to keep it could have been used to keep your half. So we're doing the things that a lot of people complain about. We're picking the winners and the losers. And so how do you quantify that we cut 120,000 plus an FTE 28,000 from their budget, and we're not cutting anything from these guys? And I'm not advocating that we should. I'm just pointing out the discrepancy. That's what I'm saying. So
I think it's coverage of service. I mean, what are you getting for your dollar versus, we have no control over those dollars. And they're running out. So, we're obviously not giving them enough if our job or our intentions as a board is to pay all those bills for everybody who's having a tough time, which I feel for them. Like I said, I'll be the first to get in my pocket and pull out cash or write a check to somebody who needs it. And they know it, unfortunately. But, 28.8 for what we get in return from that is a lot larger, in my opinion, and everyone has access. So it's easy for me to justify it because I've spent a lot of time not just meeting with the people, but researching all of this. So I don't think it's picking winners and losers. I think it's discovering what's your role.
I from my vantage point, we're helping the community. So, and you can quantify it, I can't. We're helping some and we're not helping others. So, okay, well, you don't have the votes and you don't have a second. So
No, the only way I would think to quantify this one, and it would work in favor of 211, you have a small 28,800 that impacts 64,000 folks. So the cost per dollar of contact would be extremely low compared to some of these other. Now, I'm not saying the impact is as great as getting a mortgage payment, but it may lead you in the right direction for something. So
well, there's no doubt they provide a valuable service.
I think they do, too.
24 hours
on
a
your
day,
point.
7 days a week.
If we gave it to Meals on Wheels, they get a 13-to-1 match. So I know what you're saying. We are picking winners and losers up here. So it's just really tough going through this. I think we might even be getting a little bit too tired to be doing this right now. And since we're having such an impact on people's lives, but I think we're almost done. But I think we have adequate revenues to do these things right now. So I'm not going to vote to cut it. But that probably one of the ones I would have cut it if I would have agreed to one. And kept feeding the old people and keeping the kids in houses.
Exactly.
So, exactly, your point.
One person's wants, another person's, well, maybe we can cut, or vice versa.
What our priorities are.
So it's tough, you guys.
Well, that's why we
my
were
hearts go out to
elected.
you guys, too.
Yeah.
We're making some very tough decisions.
And we could probably add 70 more items to what one person may think we should be doing versus another. So, just because.
Well, I think the community understands how difficult this is for all of us, but I think we're also displaying to the community how serious we are about fixing these roads and getting control of where we're going with our overhead, because if we don't fix the roads, it's just going to keep getting worse.
I know, but I think if you ask the community, they don't care as much about the roads as we do.
Absolutely
Depending
not.
on
They
who
don't.
you ask.
That's why, how many times have I said, roads aren't sexy? If it was up to the folks, we wouldn't be doing anything with the roads.
Go to Southern Palm Bay and ask anybody what their number one concern
But
is.
that's what I'm saying. If we allow the county roads to get to the condition that your roads in South Palm Bay are, but by then it's way too late.
Right.
The cost is.
Right, and that's why we quit creating more inventory into that one area, which we don't have funds to fix. So I don't know, I know we're going to go through this routine, but I don't know. I think this is difficult, and so that's all I'm going to say.
What's the pleasure of the board? We want to keep going, or we want to?
I think we only have one more item, right?
one more item on
All
this
right,
list.
let's do that.
So this is the Health Department funding. And the dentists have made and the dental professionals have made a pretty darn good argument. Mine was that these folks are eligible for Medicaid. We have a safety net in place, and we don't need to expand on that safety net. And if we were to do that, the federal government provides certain mechanisms which they will match if we were to decide to expand Medicaid. That's what we faced in Tallahassee. Here, we're looking at many times expanding Medicaid with no match. And that's not necessarily true with all of this $467,415. That is primarily, from my understanding, in the $347,415, if I understand that correctly. Is that a fair assessment to make, or not?
I would leave that to either Maria or Bob to respond.
I think, Commissioner Tapia, you're probably specifically referring to the amount that is used to support Space Coast Volunteers in Medicine. So that is not all the 340-some thousand. That is also used to support environmental health with the things that are not impacted by fees, and it's also used to support keeping clinics open at all 3 clinical sites for vaccines, and it's also the STD program, where we get absolutely no state funding for our STD program. So that 347 goes into all those 3 areas, which is primary care, communicable diseases, and environmental health.
So thank you for making that, and thank you for breaking this down too. Can you break it down a little bit more for me? How much of that $347,000 goes into Medicaid expansion?
Yeah, it's about a third. Bob Vita, our business manager, is here. That's why I just turned around and asked him. So he said it's about a third.
Okay. So I know I have a 20% cut here, but, and again, thank you for every darn dentist that has my phone number.
And the dental and the
that
prenatal.
called me.
I was going to say, the dental and the prenatal is not the 340.
I get it, yes, and I'm saying that's why you were so helpful when you cut this apart. I greatly appreciate it. Mine was the expansion of Medicaid. That was my issue. That is not with the maternity, as far as I'm following. That is not with the dental. That is only 1/3 of your 347,000.
Correct.
So whatever that is, about 115,000. So I would like to amend my 20% to focus in on just that 1/3 that arbitrarily expands Medicaid eligibility by having the county contribute to that and not touching the maternity, which I've disclosed that my brother on occasion works at that department, the not touching the dental, just touching not touching the environmental, not touching the disease portion, just touching the Medicaid expansion for approximately, give or take, 1/3 of that 347,000. That would be my idea.
Commissioners?
Does that impact the volunteers in medicine? Marie? Does that impact the volunteers in medicine?
Yes.
How does it impact it?
If we were to lose that funding, we would no longer be able to support Space Coast Volunteers in Medicine with providing their labs, their medical supplies. There's still the clinic space there, so I'm sure they would still be in the clinic space. But we would not be able to support them with lab medical supplies and equipment. And that's what that money is used for their patients that are serviced by volunteers.
So these are doctors, nurse practitioners, nurses that provide care voluntarily under sovereign immunity, so they can provide this care, and that would take that away? Because it wouldn't have the diagnostics?
Their organization is 100% volunteers. In fact, Audrey, who spoke up here, who is their director, is a volunteer also. She is a non-paid employee. So nobody in their organization is paid at all. So it's just our support with medical supplies, labs, equipment, and space, and phones.
So basically, that would shut down a whole clinic?
Unless Audrey found funding in another area, yeah.
But again, to be clear, and thank you very much for delineating, these are people that earn above federal poverty as defined by Medicaid eligibility.
Well, they're 200% below poverty level.
But they're below 200% of the poverty level. Okay, and that's a federal diagnostic. If they earn below, I think 130, they would be Medicaid eligible. Is that correct?
133 is the breakdown, but in the state of Florida, not too many would have Medicaid because we don't have Medicaid expansion.
Well, we didn't expand it all the way up to 200.
Yeah, but even, men aren't going to, for the most part, be eligible for Medicaid. Women, if they're pregnant, maybe, and children, maybe, but everyone else is not going to be. There's no option for Medicaid for them.
There are other health, we have the exchange that is...
Well, the exchange is for those, like you said, the 133% above poverty level, they're eligible for the exchange. If they're below 133% poverty level, they're not eligible for the exchange, and they're also not eligible for Medicaid because we don't have expanded Medicaid in our state.
So it's the gap in between what two numbers? I'm trying to understand this.
I'm not following you. So if they're 133 to 200% below poverty level, they're eligible for ACA.
Okay.
Okay? So those individuals could apply for ACA. Whether they can afford it or not is another story. But yes, they could apply if they're in that gap. If they're below 133%, they're not eligible for Medicaid, they're not eligible for ACA. Well, they're not eligible for Medicaid because our state hasn't expanded Medicaid.
Is this an expansion? Let me get my understanding. This is an expansion of Medicaid. We are going outside the guidelines set up by the federal government for Medicaid. Is that a fair assessment?
I'm not sure. I wish Audrey was here to answer the question, but that's their guidelines is 200% below poverty level.
It's not Medicaid.
It's not Medicaid.
No, it's volunteers.
It's pure
volunteers in
volunteers.
medicine.
It's a pure volunteer clinic.
I get it,
Yeah.
but and I love the fact that folks are volunteering. It's absolutely wonderful. But we have safety nets set up that don't require volunteers. We have Medicaid reimbursement rates in the state of Florida that if you meet a certain eligibility, you have access to care. And this expands it.
Commissioner Tabaya, I'm not really sure where they have access to care because if they don't go to clinics like this, they go to ERs. I don't know, and I could not be aware of where they go.
Many doctors take Medicaid.
But they don't have Medicaid. That's the issue. They don't have Medicaid. You're absolutely right. If they have Medicaid, they will have access to care. They don't have Medicaid. That's the issue.
Because they make more than the Medicaid minimum, but they don't make enough to pay for, is your argument, because they don't make enough, yes. But again, that was set up, we didn't set that up. The state of Florida didn't set up. The federal government said if you make above a certain level, it's your responsibility to go out and get medical care. And it's wonderful what you're doing. It's absolutely wonderful, but it's money that we are not leveraging and expanding eligibility.
Yeah, okay.
I work in a daycare, so it's wonderful the job I do. I have so much contact with these types of families that are struggling. We have families that, let's say I'm around a lot of these families. So you have let me pick on young moms again with children. If she works and has a job and say she makes $400 a week, she doesn't qualify for Medicaid. The kids do, but she does not. She does not make enough money to pick up any kind of health care. And those types of jobs those girls are working, the bigger companies can afford to give their people health care. The smaller companies can't, or they can't afford to hire them. So you have that situation there, but if you've got the same mom and she decides she's not going to get a job, she's home earning Section 8, food stamps, the governor's giving them ELC to take their kids, and then she gets Medicaid. So we've got a messed up system. But if you've got someone who's actually trying to get out there and support their own family, they really do have this little block here. And then when you go to do the taxes, I quit doing all those altogether because I couldn't handle doing the penalties on them. But I mean, we do have a really bad loophole of a segment of population that if they're trying to work to stay off government assistance, they don't qualify and they really can't afford it because it's quite pricey when they're trying to take care of the family. So there really is that little loophole that we have a problem with out there in healthcare.
Thank you, Maria.
I think this is one of those areas where the community is invested, and I think that's what sort of separates this. And yeah, okay, I'll be biased because I'm a nurse, but I mean, I think if you've committed yourself and the community obviously is committed to this cause to help this segment of the population that can't qualify for assistance. I mean, and that's just only part of what we're funding with the health department. I mean, this is one of those, again, those falls under the health and nutrition of the community, and so I'm okay with it. I mean, unless I see otherwise that they're wasting the money, I'm okay with it.
Again, I think I can
toast.
count. I think I can count to 3 and
All right.
pull
We're
it.
good. I think that's a good stopping point.
Break or we stop?
Don't get halfway through it.
I don't think we're even halfway.
Not even halfway. Do we have anybody here that's not about to come back?
Parks and Rec, Central Services, Information Technology, Medical Examiner, and Veteran Services.
Just keep us on track, Frank. Just say, shut up. You're awesome. Thank you.
Well, I've been trying to move it as fast as I can, but, this stuff deserves thoughtful process.
We're probably going to have to add on some of the shops if we keep going through line by lines.
What are we covering on Thursday?
All of the stuff you didn't cover today. The charter officers, fire rescue, and library services.
All right.
So long list is Parks and Rec, Veteran Services, Medical Examiner, Information Technology, Central Services, Charter Officers to include the Sheriff's Office, Tax Collector, Clerk to the Board, Property Appraiser, Supervisor of Elections, Fire Rescue, Library Services.
Tell them to keep it short.
Piece of cake. Okay, this meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, Chairman.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.